This integrative dermatologist says beauty is more than skin deep. It's a window into our overall health.
Most people, I think, fear aging because you feel like I look unhealthy, or I look unwell, or I don't look as desirable, or whatever it is.
In these pandemic times, your level of health can be the difference between life and death. Dr. Raja explains it's the micro-imbalances we need to pay attention to.
Usually you have I'm healthy or I'm not healthy, but what's the science of being healthy? Like if you're healthy and you go to the doctor, you're healthy, great. But then you might still have micro imbalances or some issue that comes up. The more vital you are, the more, the more settled you feel. And we know this, if you're under a lot of stress, you are going to get sick more easily. So my patient wasn't as depressed anymore. Her anxiety had gone down, and she said it was like the most magnificent thing. And I didn't give her some fancy schmancy drug. This whole concept of being able to bounce back and being well and having that internal confidence is a big aspect. And really, if you think about Ayurveda, it's the science of balance and the science of imbalance. And when you have imbalances, the beauty is no matter where you sit in space, if you can figure out where your imbalances are, we can then tailor things to you to be more personal.
Aloha mamas, and welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom Room. This show is brought to you by the Maui Mama magazine. And we are here for you, the Maui Mama, to help you to connect and express and share all those things that are on our minds during this pandemic time. Our motto is #share aloha, not corona. I'm Angeline Chu Longshore, and I want to check in with you mamas. How are you doing? Our islands just opened up, right? We have a lot more tourists here. And I'm reading in the news that on the mainland and in Europe, there's maybe like a third wave happening of more cases rising, spiking. It's not going away anytime soon. What I'm actually not hearing about is people talking about how we can combat or just protect ourselves against this virus by being super healthy. Now, we know that there are some people who, like we've heard about marathon runners who get the disease, who get COVID, and they actually don't do very well. They get a severe case and, one actually nearly died. So the thought of being healthy is relative to the coronavirus. The coronavirus doesn't care what we think is health. It wants to get in there. And if we're not actually healthy, like, really, really healthy in various degrees, then it will act a lot more severely. So that's what we're talking about today. We talked to a specialist, dermatologist, and because so much of actually being healthy when it comes to the coronavirus and the root causes of health are about imbalances, health imbalances, and that shows up in our skin and our beauty and even in how we age. So that's why we're talking to him, because he has seen quite a bit and can tell us how actually we can look at our health a new way. Hey, and if you want to donate to the Corona Mama Show, I have a new text to donate way that you can do that. So the number is 808-215-4858, 808-215-4858. Or you can click on the donation link on the Maui Mama Facebook page where you're watching this show. Click below. All right, there's something else I have for you. It's a visual treat at the end of the show. You can take in all the beauty from local artists that are part of a free virtual gallery experience that the Hui up in Makawao has put online. And we also talk about programs that they offer for families that you can get involved in. And for our Actions of Aloha segment, we want to recognize Maui Food Hubs. The Maui Food Hub is a nonprofit community-based organization that started as an answer to the needs of the community in this pandemic. They've created a system for local farmers and small businesses to connect with the consumers in an affordable way to help people to get fresh local produce. and that includes low-income residents, food banks, and community kitchens. Their vision is to support sustainability and food security on Maui. Maui Food Hub has changed the name to MauiHub.org, and we talked with KOKO resident Keith Ranney about how he got involved. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Thank you, Angeline.
So tell us, introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Okay. My name is Keith Ranney. I moved here in the late 90s, been here about 22 years. I didn't know anyone when I came here, and I wanted to get involved and be of service. So I just put that thought out there and suddenly found myself becoming a volunteer coordinator. That was not my training or background, but it was a wonderful way for me to get involved in the community. And my first client was the Maui Film Festival. And I continued to support that organization for literally 19 years in a row through its 20th year. And we haven't seen it return this year, maybe next year. And I've also been officially the voice of Maui Interscholastic League springboard diving. I do the announcing for all the high school diving meets. That's my athletic background. And for the last 5 years, since 2015, I was the communications director statewide for Hawaii Farmers Union United, where they have 13 chapters, and I helped keep the various different agricultural communities connected through digital media. That's my official formal background, is film production and digital communications. So now this opportunity that I'm involved in, MauiHub.org, was born out of the health crisis. So beginning back in March, we pivoted in recognition that the farmers were no longer had the markets they were accustomed to, the hotels and the restaurants, et cetera. And there was going to be a lot of wasted food in the fields, and we needed to redirect that food direct to the consumer. So the idea of a food hub has been kicked down the road for 10 years or so at the county level, through the farmers union, et cetera. But it just simply took this particular crisis to mobilize. A lot of people were interested at the beginning, but ultimately, when you have an organization like this, as you use technology, it streamlines down to, a core group. So it's really been about 6 of us that have kept the wheels on the wagon, so to speak, and continue to coordinate the acquisition of fresh produce directly from the fields, and some value-added products. Our criteria is that it's locally sourced, if can be, and it is aggregated through one of our partners, Sunfresh Hawaii. They're in Omaha, and they are. We send a pick list out to the farmers on Wednesday after the order cycle. And it's all sorted in bags on Friday, and we distribute it on Saturday, and then the store opens again Saturday afternoon through Tuesday. That's the general period of activity, is store opening on Saturday through Tuesday night. Get the word out to the farmers what has been ordered. They bring just what was ordered, and we create these basic customized CSA boxes. CSA meaning consumer supported agriculture, or customer supported agriculture. So these offering customized boxes, not just what's in season, just a specific amount of pounds for a flat amount. People can buy whatever, or no minimum and no maximum. Makes it actually a lot more complicated, but a lot more satisfying on the consumer end, because you can get what you want.
Yeah, I've seen the website. You can pick and choose what you want to order for whatever you want that week, which is so awesome. I just, I wanted to feature this as an Actions of Aloha, because from the beginning, I heard about you guys, and especially when we were all in lockdown, or not lockdown, but, stay at home order, it felt like a scary thing for a lot of families. Like, where are we didn't really want to go out to too many places. We used to go to Costco or Foodland, and to the farmer's market, and then to Kula Country Farms, and then down to Kahumanu to get our farm goods there, wherever we were doing our errands. And then suddenly we're like, we have to minimize our route of where we go and our exposure to possibly getting COVID-19. So the fact that you pulled together and also to help the farmers, they would have had a much harder time in getting to the consumer. And then the restaurant businesses and anyone who were utilizing their services and organizing how we could do that and how they could do that. So I think that's so awesome.
Thank you. I think, yes, it's definitely about supporting a farmer, but actually at the heart of our core organization, we're really focused on the food insecure. We already know that we have a general lack of food sovereignty and security here in the islands. Some of the food travels 10,000 miles or so. So the food insecure aspect of it has been really a strong driving force by our core leadership. And getting the SNAP EBT program launched this week has been a huge focus for the last few months. And it, the USDA doesn't move super fast, and we're new and we're novel. So it took a great deal of focus and determination by our treasurer, one of our founders, Linda Love, to get the application in, both for our nonprofit status and also to the USDA for the SNAP program. And now that has been launched, we're getting a tremendous boost in activity. And this should be extremely helpful for those folks that, their next meal is an unknown. And that's just not a great way for us to support our ohana here in Hawaii, knowing that people are food insecure. So
that's just huge. The fact that they can get fresh food. I mean, fresh food through their EBT and SNAP cards. That's amazing. Is there anything that you think that people might want to know that they may not about the program?
Well, a number of things. I think we talked briefly when we were first talking about local food economy as a way of really strengthening the local economy in general, just because of the multiplication factor. When you source locally and you pay a local farmer top dollar, I mean, farmers are used to in a wholesale market getting pennies on the dollar. We're focused on trying to pay them as much as we can, literally 70 to 75 cents on the dollar, so that they can sustain their families, and that money goes back into the community. The SNAP EBD program is going to have a little turbocharge here soon. It's already nationally, there's a double bucks program where people have double purchasing power with their SNAP dollars, and that will be available through MauiHub.org here probably within the next month. So all of this is kind of moving. We're really kind of pushing the envelope here in terms of how they identify a food hub and to qualify for these federal programs. So we're making great strides there, as are others across the country. And here in Hawaii in general, there are food hubs are starting to organize around the state. And we look at each other as autonomous and yet interdependent. Other philosophical aspects is local, locally sourced everything. There are, few things like we don't have flowers really that are created here in Hawaii. So we've had to really look carefully at baked goods and things like that. And we're still working on it, but we want to stay true to not idealism, but the ideal of really focused on locally sourced, but locally grown, locally manufactured products.
Is this going to continue after the pandemic, whenever that ends? Will you continue this model?
Yeah, absolutely. From the very beginning, we had no intention. I said, this is our opportunity to restructure something that has been broken from the beginning. We're kind of, this is maybe a reach, but modern day A'apuaha. And I have to practice my pronunciation of that, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, for sure.
rather the pyramid or the pie slicing of it, we now have roads. I mean, everything has been redirected based on automobile traffic. So now we have 5 distribution points. You can kind of look at them. They're kind of equally dispersed around the island. You end up with kind of a new form of Apua'a, where people could come and get their their needs for the week. And we've now added naked cow dairy, the only Hawaii-based dairy. So they have something called the Udder Box that has 4 different products in it: a soft cheese, a hard cheese, I think a yogurt, and something else. And it's become very popular. And again, everybody's pretty jazzed about the whole program. We're in a kind of pre-funded state. We're just limping along. We're all volunteers at this point, and working hard to get the word out to various funding sources, grantors, etc. And this is a project that is not designed to be profitable. We necessarily lose money every week. Had enough of a boost at the very beginning that we're good for another few months without any additional outside income, but it's coming to the point where some of these grants and some support by the county would be very timely. Unfortunately, we were not selected within the CARES Act funding, and that was quite a disappointment, but we'll stay going. We are well on our way to getting our 501c3 status. Definitely we'll have it by the end of the year, probably maybe even by next month. So anybody that does donate within this year will be able to have an official letter, presumably, once we get our letter of determination.
I really appreciate you guys, and thanks for being here. Thanks so much. And now for our Zoom chat about being healthy. What does it really mean to be healthy? Which is a really important question when we consider COVID and how it's affecting people in different degrees of severity. And it really comes down to depending on our various health factors. These are called micro-imbalances, which we really don't know a lot about. And so that's what we're talking to our guest about today. We're excited to talk with an integrative dermatologist, Dr. Raja Sivamani. He helps patients with their health, merging bioengineering, nutrition, cosmetics, and skin biology. A bioengineer, board-certified dermatologist, and Ayurveda practitioner, he serves as the lead scientific advisor for the online platforms Dermveda and LearnSkin. He's also an associate professor of clinical dermatology at the University of California, Davis, and he's currently conducting clinical studies focusing on engineering, nutrition, and microbiome. He's published over 100 peer-reviewed research manuscripts and his book on Cosmeceutical and Active Cosmetics. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Raja here in the CoronaMama Zoom room with his perspective and knowledge on integrative health. So let's bring him on in. Hi, Raja. Welcome to the CoronaMama Zoom room.
Oh, hi. I'm excited to be here with you. Such an exciting podcast, and looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, me too. There's so much I want to know. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a dermatologist, but probably before that, I'm a husband, and I have a lovely wife, Vinita, and she runs an educational company. So we're kind of vibing in the same kind of format with medicine and education. So I love that space. So I'm an integrative dermatologist. I'm also an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I practice up in the Sacramento area. I have a love of people, but I also have a love of science, and I was an engineer before I went into medicine. And then once I went through engineering school, I realized I love people enough that I wanted to talk to them every single day, all the time. So that's what I do now. I have a clinical practice as a dermatologist, but I also do quite a bit of clinical research. And we love exploring these areas that I feel are vastly underexplored, that bring together Eastern and Western concepts like nutrition or botanicals, or the thoughts around how to manage stress better, or probiotics, gut microbiome. I think all of those areas need more exploration, and I think it's exciting to bring science to it.
Wow, there's so many things here that we're going to get into. So I know that we're, just looking at where we are in the pandemic, a lot of feelings about what's going on. But
Right.
Before we get into all those things with our health, I'm really curious about what brought you from engineering or bioengineering into where you are now. That's kind of a fascinating journey. And I think that might tell us a little bit about your approach to how you do what you do now.
Yeah, well, actually, the real question for me was, how did I end up in bioengineering? Because when I initially went to school. I was at Berkeley and I went there thinking I was going to go into medical school. I guess that did happen at the end of it all. But when I got there, I was biochemistry, and I remember taking a lot of the classes, and I wanted to know how things worked. And I still remember my first physics class. And that's really where all of this started. It was all physics in the end. It's got to be a quote somewhere, right, Angeline? It's all physics in the end. I don't know, but it was all physics for me. I was in a class and I wanted to understand, how do we derive the equation? And I remember sitting in class and the people next to me were like, oh, it doesn't matter. Here's the equation. Just plug and chug and you get the answer. And I remember thinking, well, but I want to know how they derive the equation so I know how to change that or think about the equation differently in different settings if I needed to. And that's when I realized, I really have a love in trying to understand how things work. Not just do they work, but why they work and how they work. And I switched my major to bioengineering because I wanted to take the advanced physics class. Instead, I dropped that one and I went into the advanced class, or the one for engineers. And then I quickly realized engineering is such a cool field because you learn all these tools and then you learn how to apply them to different sort of settings. So you don't have to memorize everything from scratch. You just need to know the basic concepts. Perhaps you do need to memorize some of the concepts, but then you get to adapt. And then after engineering, I still had that love for medicine, the love for wanting to work with people. But when I went to medical school, it was just a totally different experience. I didn't worry about memorizing every single detail. I wanted to look at what are the biochemical pathways that are involved, or what are the different sort of features that cause this disease to occur. And then can I take that and adapt any sort of treatment into this paradigm? And then where does the paradigm fall short? Where does it not work? Because then that's where you can start to bridge in things like nutrition or other facets that we just weren't taught. And I feel like going through engineering school made me comfortable not knowing things. And maybe perhaps that's the biggest walk away that I got from engineering. It's okay not to know because we'll figure it out. And it's okay to tell your patients that too, that we don't know all the answers here, but we'll figure it out. Let's work through it together. And so I feel like that's how I tick. And it's totally changed my perspective on medicine.
I feel like we need more people like you, because where we are now with this pandemic, we don't know so much. There's so much that is that uncertainty, and there's so many studies that are going on. But to have that kind of thinking where it's not following a certain path. And I know that you are involved in many clinical studies, even at this moment, not necessarily with COVID, but it's this kind of thinking that I think really helps us in general, even if you're not working on a COVID study, that the way that you think helps us, the layperson, the normal person, to utilize these, you found ways that you can mesh things. And that to me seems like more holistic, where we don't have to rely so much on when is that vaccine or that treatment coming, where we can do this thing, as I'm talking about, being proactive and saying, okay, we really need to just look at the root of our health, our well-being, so that we can avoid all those things that could happen to us, that even if we do interact with COVID, that maybe it just like goes through us and we're asymptomatic or something like that. So right. That I just love that bioengineering taught you that kind of thinking, so that there are people like you in the world who can help us to find these new ways, which is so awesome. And I'm also curious about, you mentioned Ayurveda, and I think that that's sort of innocuous to a lot of people. And that, to me, what I know of it, seems to be a holistic method. And it kind of scares some people. Like, I know a lot of you mamas out there, you're like, what is that? That sounds really weird and foreign. And, but it actually is just, maybe you should tell us what it is, because then we know part of the knowledge that you'll bring to what you're doing here with us.
Well, Angeline, first of all, you're so sweet to mention everything that you just did. And Ayurveda is, to the person that's not introduced to it, it is weird, it is foreign, and it's awesome. And I'll tell you why. Because one thing I've learned along the way is that every medicine is going to evolve, and we're all going to see shifts. And sometimes what happens is traditional medicine, the practitioners, I hope, are open to shifting as much as one of the benefits of Western medicine is everyone is open to shifting. They may not seem like they're open to shifting, but as research comes out, they have no choice, but they have to shift. But the same thing happens even in traditional medicine forms. Like you look at traditional Chinese, or you look at Ayurveda, or you look at naturopathy. As the science shifts and we have new knowledge, they will shift too. So let me tell you about Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a traditional form of medicine that comes out of India. And it was really based on, and I think this is where the engineering mind really helped me build the bridges a bit more. If you think about how you describe the body, you can describe them in the sense of functions like we do in Western medicine. You can say, okay, there's a biochemical, there's a cell. The cell does something to then build the tissue. The tissues all work together, and then you have perhaps organ or organ systems, and then finally like a full human being. Well, the way that Ayurveda approaches descriptions is even more general in that you can describe anything in the world. And what they do is they rely on the 5 elements. And I think this is the really, really cool part. And I don't want it to get too esoteric because I want everybody to just be able to wrap their head around this. And so the 5 elements are nothing special. It's like it takes you back to the first grade, right? Earth, water, air, fire, and ether. And the translations can lose something there. So just remember, these are translated from Sanskrit. They had a lot of different meaning. It's not just earth, water, fire, air, ether, but what they mean. Earth means the substance in your body, the structure. We're all made up of something that's structurally sound. Whether it's the collagen in your skin or the bones in your body, you have something making up structure. And that's earth. Water literally is water. I mean, we are considerable amounts of water, but it also has something known as, like, if you have a really hot pot, what do? You douse it with water to cool it down. If you're sticking it into the sink, all the steam comes off of it because the water just absorbs energy. That's what water also represents. When Ayurveda was first being developed, the Ayurvedic practitioners were able to see these kind of concepts. So water in your body is your ability to absorb energy, antioxidants. We're full of antioxidants, full of defense systems. And so that's what water would be. And then you have air, which is just movement of the mind, movement of the body. Your cells have to move things within the cells. Your arms have to move. Your body has to move. So that's movement. Then you have fire, which is just transformation, energy. All of us have an internal motivation. So you have emotional transformation, but you could have physical transformation. You eat and you digest. That literally is what fire represents. And it's called Agni, especially in the gut, when you think about gut health. And finally, ether, I think, is the most beautiful element, totally, because ether represents space. And it's not just space that is between you and, say, the wall behind you, but the fact that you as a person are literally taking up space. And as you age, sometimes your skin will thin. And if your skin thins down, you had collagen that was there before, and now it's taken up by, you see the ether more. But ether can also be mental space. How many of you have broken up with someone that was really close to you, or lost a loved one, and you say, wow, I feel a little bit more empty inside, or I have a hole in my heart? That's what ether is. It's that space that was not only there for physical connection, but for emotional and spiritual connections. And so those 5 aspects totally map over to biochemical pathways, to the structures, to proteins, to functions. And in Western medicine, we don't have a biochemical pathway for love. We might be able to image it in the brain, but we still know, like, when you feel love or you feel those butterflies inside, that is explained with that ether connection. So when you take those 5 aspects, the key in Ayurveda is to understand, where's your balance sit? And they have these elements all combined to simplify it. And they call it Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And all of those represent like an overall action in the body. Vata is movement, Pitta is just transformation, and Kapha is more structure. And you see, where are your imbalances, where are your tendencies? If you're someone that tends to gain weight easily, that means you have a bit more of a Kapha dominance. If you have someone that tends to be very driven, but maybe you get angry more easily or have anger management issues, then you have a Pitta dominance. And so things can be balanced and imbalanced. And if you have a tendency towards anxiety, you just can't get your mind to stop at night, and you have trouble going to bed and just getting your mind to slow down, that's a Vata imbalance. And so you have these tendencies, and when you have imbalances, the beauty is, no matter where you sit in space, if you can figure out where your imbalances are, we can then tailor things to you to be more personal. And then this is where the bridge comes in. Western medicine is about doing this research and finding out what's the average effect on every single human being. And then we say, okay, let's apply this average effect to everybody, but we know everybody's not average, right? Average is a construct. We're all unique and we're not totally average. And so Ayurveda brings in that other piece where you say, okay, we appreciate that there is an average effect, but you, Angeline, have different hair than I'm going to have, or you might have different skin tendencies that I'm going to have. And how do we adjust those nuances that make us human to really then understand how do you approach that from a treatment perspective? And so that maybe not a total, little bit of a bigger nutshell there, but still in a nutshell is kind of the Ayurvedic approach.
That's so awesome, because when we think of how most people think about their health, they think I'm either sick or I'm not. I
That's
need
right.
to take care of whatever uncomfortable feeling I'm having, if I'm having a cold or a flu or skin rash or something like that. And then we typically will try to find a medicine or a remedy to fix that. Um, and what we reach for is not tailor-made. What we reach for is just for the masses, for probably a dozen or more issues. And so if we interact with someone who knows Ayurvedic medicine, then we're getting this tailor-made look into who we are spiritually. I think a lot of times people think, well, what does my spirit have to do with my health? Well, I think we're seeing this, mamas, in the pandemic, right? We're seeing, if we're scared, if we're depressed, if we're not getting outside, if we're emotionally feeling something, our spirit goes down. Our belief system in whatever other source, if you have that, can either bring us up or or make us feel something else. So the fact that Ayurvedic medicine takes all that into account is like, wow, we're getting like a custom, I don't know, like a custom made, like, profile of how to take care of ourselves. And to me, that is super cool, because, we're seeing with COVID, and it's so interesting how it's revealing so many things to us, that every single person is not the same. And even when they say, oh, it doesn't affect kids, now they're like, oh, it does. Some kids it does. Some. And then what are the things that make the difference? And we're finding out slowly, but I'm thinking that if we can take care of ourselves with these individual looks into our health, then we can really be proactive personally. I mean, like every single person's life is going to be different depending on where they live, who they interact with, what their beliefs are. And so if we take responsibility for that, then we're saying, okay, I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm going to use tools that are custom made for me, for my chosen lifestyle. And doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but I think that's so awesome. It's just like, wow.
No, it was a big wow for me when I started learning it. And really, if you think about Ayurveda, it's the science of balance and the science of imbalance. And, if you only think of what I put in my body as the food that we eat, you've knocked out the other four senses. And really, if you think about what we put into our body, it includes what we listen to, what we hear. I mean, soothing music, soothing voices, soothing relationships. What's the input visually? What's the input from auditory? What's the input from taste, touch? That's another really big one. So, when you start looking at all the inputs that are out there, like what are the colors that you're looking at on a daily basis? That, they talk about this. They talk about if you have anger management issues, or I shouldn't even say that. If you have different sorts of imbalances, there are certain colors that can help just create a sense of balance. Sometimes what happens is people think, okay, if I just put this color, it'll fix everything. No, it's not the point. The point is that it's these micro changes. And so I love what you made as a point. Usually you have, I'm healthy or I'm not healthy, but what's the science of being healthy? Like if you're healthy and you go to the doctor, you're healthy, great. But then you might still have micro imbalances or some issue that comes up. Or, I mean, we all know this. We have tendencies, we eat certain foods and you might get indigestion. The person next to you doesn't get indigestion at all. Or something comes up and, it's from your childhood and the way you react to something might be different than someone else next to you who might stress more easily. You're both healthy people, according to the word healthy. But what about those micro imbalances or those just little nuances in there? That's where Ayurveda comes in and can really help you think through those aspects. And I think it's the science of being well, not the science of just fixing a disease. And I think there is a whole science to being well. And that's what I love about it. And, as a dermatologist, I think it totally fits because our skin is constantly exposed to things from the inside and the outside. So the science of being well is almost, there's no other better place to see it take form every single day than your skin. So I find it like a great motivating tool to talk to people about how to be healthy in general. And so, I mean, that's my goal, is let's use the skin as a way to motivate people to think even bigger. Let's think big about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I know as a woman, skin, aging, all of that is super important, but it is an indicator of what's going on inside. And you made a point about sleep. And I know that when I don't get sleep, when I do anything that is not in the best interest of my health, it shows on my skin. And so it's interesting how I'm thinking about your path of how you think bioengineering, Ayurveda, and then like going into dermatology. And I don't know if that was the path, but how there's so much that works together here, even though we don't think about those things being the same. It's all from that wellness. And I think that's so important because, like you were saying, it's about being well. And we're seeing that the people who are well don't get affected that much through COVID. And it's not only about COVID, because we're going to have other diseases come through, hopefully not any other pandemics this big, but that wellness part is we're waking up right now. I think a lot of people are waking up to, how well am I? I could be this person who jogs all the time and I think I'm healthy, and then they get devastatingly sick with COVID. So they, that idea of healthy, but then there's that actual wellness piece that is here too. So I don't know if you want, which direction you want to go into with that, but there's so many places that we.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, if you look at being well, obviously genetics is going to play a role too. I mean, now your genetics are not your destiny, but genetics do play a really important role. But now you have the concept of epigenetics. You can selectively express certain genes, or the way you eat, or the way you practice your lifestyle habits. Say, for example, smoking, that's going to affect how fast you age. But this concept of being well is definitely one that's been deep rooted in Ayurveda for a while. There's this concept known as ojas. And ojas is also kind of akin to qi from traditional Chinese medicine. We know that qi is really important. It's that life source, the vitality. And in Ayurvedic medicine, it's known as ojas. And there's also this concept known in Sanskrit known as jiva, which is the vitality of your body. And so the more vital you are, the more, the more settled you feel. And we know this, if you're under a lot of stress, you are going to get sick more easily. And when you get sick, it takes longer to pull out of it. But it's not just about COVID, like you say. It could be if you have a negative interaction with a colleague or a negative interaction with the patient. How quickly can you bounce back from that? Or if you make a mistake, even if you're a student studying on a test, or you have a child that's studying on a test, and they don't do well on that, how quickly do they bounce back? Or if they have a negative interaction, say, if it's something between their friends or something, how quickly do they bounce back from that? This whole concept of being able to bounce back and being well and having that internal confidence is a big aspect of Ayurvedic rejuvenation. It's not just about looking well, but it's truly about going deep down inside and addressing some of those. And sometimes it's not religious, but spiritually, you have to address some deeper kind of insecurities that you might have too, that I think are really important. But overall, I think the idea is that if you can figure out where your balances and imbalances are, then you can really plan ahead. And I'll give you an example. So when you come from an aging perspective, a lot of people use the term anti-aging, and a lot of us will use it just because it's something that is a trending term. We know what the term means, but you can't really anti-age. I mean, what you want to do is we're all going to age. You want to I want to call it, you want to have embraced aging, where you embrace it and you understand, like, this is how I'm aging. And, you age in a way that you feel healthy. And most people, I think, fear aging because you feel like I look unhealthy, or I look unwell, or I don't look as desirable, or whatever it is. But once you start changing that to saying, I love my body, I love who I am, I love the way I'm changing, and you treat it in a different way, then the aging process changes. I had a patient who had a really tough time with aging, and I thought a little bit of it was just being a little too hard on themselves. And so I taught them to start using this whole principle called self-abhyanga, where you do a self-massage with an oil. And I said, which oil do you like? And just spend 5 minutes before you shower putting this on your body, and then just say, you know what, I love the way my body feels. Like, enjoy the texture of your body, enjoy the way the oil smells, and just that moment. And I don't know how many people spend even 5 minutes just saying, hey, this is my body. But if you do that, you really change the relationship with your own body, and you're not as hard on yourself. I know that sounds like such a simple thing, but it is. Once you start appreciating your body, you start to realize, hey, this is my body. I can try to do things to make it healthier, but I might as well be happy with what I have, because this is what I have right now. And I might as well be happy with the evolution that I'm going to go towards. And I think that that's a really important mindset to shift, and it can be a tough one. But I think that once you get there, it's amazing. So my patient wasn't as depressed anymore. Her anxiety had gone down, and she said it was like the most magnificent thing. And I didn't give her some fancy schmancy drug. It was just get some coconut oil and, think about yourself, and think about how much you love yourself. That made a huge difference for her.
Wow. Sometimes we need permission to do these things. I'm finding, like, if I say something to a friend, it's like, well, you can do this. It's like, oh, I can,
Right.
and what you're talking about, it sounds like, is a relationship to ourselves.
That's right.
And what happens, I think, in this culture, this American culture, is we're always looking out, or a lot of us, we tend to be taught to look out, to compare, to achieve, to do those things so that we feel better by doing those things outside of us. And the relationship inside gets lost. I think a lot of people don't even think about having a relationship with yourself. And so the actual tangible thing of putting oil on your skin is like permission to spend 5 minutes to have that relationship with yourself. And maybe that didn't go across her mind in those words, but it started that for her. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about sometimes someone telling you and giving you permission to do something. And it may not be exactly like this psychologist saying, you have to have a relationship with yourself, but it's like the act of it naturally brought her back to herself, almost like yoga or something. It's like we need to sometimes do movement or do something that people think of yoga as like exercise, but I've heard it's actually, and I believe, because I've experienced it, that relationship to yourself also. And so sometimes we need to have these practices that get to that point where we actually need to be. The act itself is maybe not as like crucial as where it leads us. And, so that's like just such a beautiful thing as part of wellness too. I think we forget about wellness as there's an inner life that we all can work on. And that inner life is part of our wellness. If, mamas, if you're at home and you're like, what do you mean by inner life? It's like, well, if you're emotionally wrecked inside, you'll see that reflect in everything in your life, in your household, in your child, and, everything happens. And you're like, why is this happening? And, it starts with the mama setting the tone. We set the tone in the house. And so if our inner life, if what we feel inside is not well, then that just kind of manifests into chaos. And then that can affect our well-being in general, in that holistic way. That's what I've seen.
I think that's so true. I mean, if you ask a lot of people, what is the closest personal relationship that you have? Many people will think of the loved ones that are close to them, which is absolutely true, but very few will name themselves as part of the closest relationships that you have. But you know, and perhaps it's because you take that for granted, or you have already said, hey, this is me. But it's nice to verbalize that, because then you start to realize, oh, I do have a relationship with myself. Or, you know, when we do a lot of cosmetic consultations as well. I mean, I have an integrative practice, but we also do a lot of cosmetics. I used to be the director of aesthetics when I was at the university, and now we're building a integrative wellness aesthetics center. And one of the things that I ask people to do is, you know, they'll come in and say, I'd like this changed, or I'd like that addressed. And I'll give them a mirror and I'll tell them, okay, tell me what you see. And I'm very careful about that. I don't say, tell me what you want to have fixed. I usually tell them, tell me what you see. And usually they're not going to tell me all the beautiful aspects of themselves that they love, right? They'll point out all the imperfections that they want to have fixed. And it's probably the nature of the visit, I understand. But there's a part of me that hopes that they see those other parts to them too, that are actually beautiful and that are part of it. And, you know, sometimes they'll ask me, they say, doesn't this just look so bad, the sunspots or whatnot? And I do tell them, you know, maybe I'm biased, but I know that that's actually part of the skin, and I know the biology, and I know like all the things that went into that. So maybe you got a sunspot because you spent more time, you know, working with their child because they were learning a sport and you were outdoors teaching them. I mean, I don't know where the sunspot came from, and there's maybe a beautiful journey there that I don't know about. I'm happy to help you get rid of it if you want, but the journey had a lot more power to it than just whatever shows up on your face. There was a lot more meaning in your life journey to get to this point. So I try to remind them of those aspects, because I think then you put aesthetics in the right context. I mean, I still think, you know, aesthetics is important to a lot of people, and I think it is a reflection of, you know, how they look, and they want to look in a certain way, and, you know, they have a certain sense of beauty. I'm not going to tell them what to believe in terms of that, but I do want people to realize that you should be happy before you get the procedure, not because of the procedure, because that's not possible. I can never make someone happy because of a procedure.
So this is a really informal show, so I'm going to do something a little bit odd, but I'm just going to show you my sunspots on my, can you see that on my leg?
Oh yeah.
And
see,
so
that must be snorkeling.
Well, it's surfing. It's surfing.
There you go. See?
So I used to go to a dermatologist in Beverly Hills, and you probably know him. And he saw me after I moved to Maui, and he was like horrified that I had sunspots. And the thing is that, you know, in his mind, it's like, well, don't go in the sun. And for me, surfing has become such a joy. I mean, I literally feel elated and giddy, and it does so much for me that I thought, in the holistic sense, this is good for me. Yeah. And I do what I can. I actually wear pants when I surf, like, you know, pull on water pants. And I'm just going to have some spots. I don't know if there's anything that can be done, probably not, but it's more about the overall joy, like you said. I mean, our wellness is so much of, you know, like choosing how we live. And I could be that LA person like I was before, you know, with perfect legs, no spots. But I didn't have that knowing of surfing, and I didn't know how, like, what that could do for me on so many levels. So I think that's, you know, something we have to consider when we're thinking about wellness. And then
what are perfect legs anyway, Angeline? What are perfect legs anyway, right?
Well,
we know what the Hollywood approach is. And I understand. I mean, I do sclerotherapy. So yes, I do understand, you know, what people are looking for, but what is perfect anyway?
Right. I mean, coming from LA, there is that whole Hollywood, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because there is something beautiful about beauty. But there's the feel like you must, that thing, I think, is you have to conform to a standard. That to me is taking away of who, like, our knowing of ourselves. And if we can, you know, appreciate beauty in what we have, like you said, embracing it. You know, it's like, I have spots, but I'm embracing that part of me, because that's just the joy of surfing. But then I do feel like beauty also, I used to have this guilt about beauty because I thought, oh, it's so superficial. I should just not worry about. But then I realized beauty in every sense is spiritual nourishment too, because when we look at like a beautiful ocean or a beautiful sky, we download like, oh, like this sense of nature and beauty. And so when we look at a beautiful face or like glowing eyes or, from health, I think when we're healthy, we feed our children from our beautiful faces, from our beautiful eyes, from our beautiful smile, all of those things. So I got over the whole thing about, don't worry so much about beauty. I'm not worried about it. But I pay attention to it because I feel like it feeds my children, it feeds my family, it feeds friends. We respond to it as human beings. So it's super important. And, so
some people
inside out.
They do get an extra shot of confidence from it too. And, it's not, I don't think it's my place to determine where people get their confidence from or what's going to give them that little extra boost to, make their life that much fuller. And so and I agree with you. I think if beauty is an important aspect of it, and I personally think it is an important aspect, I think aesthetics is important. I think it goes much, much, much deeper than skin deep. I mean, I think that it affects the psyche. They've done studies. When people get Botox, for example, and you can't see yourself frown as often, you actually can shift their sense of depression. So this is not just about getting a procedure done. There is some biofeedback that occurs as part of it that can actually be very beneficial. And so I think that, people have to realize that whenever you're shifting things in the body, it can be motivational to continue to live healthy too. So for example, if someone comes in and they get botulinum toxin injections and it helps them as the first step to start thinking about themselves in a positive way, then they're like, I'm going to change my diet and I'm going to start exercising more and cultivate better relationships. So I'm not saying botulinum toxin makes you a great mother. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want to be like those MasterCard commercials or whatever it was that they used to make all these like 100 different, steps to get to a certain point. But if it's the first step to helping people feel more confident and comfortable, I think that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. You don't have to feel like that's vain or anything. I'll tell you, a lot of people are thinking the same thing around you. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I really want to get into the topic of sleep because I've been having a hard time sleeping. And I also know that, it has so much to do with our health and wellness. And you were telling me that there's some Ayurvedic insight about sleep. And so if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, when you think of I have insomnia, that's an umbrella term. And the Ayurvedic perspective is that the way you have insomnia, the way you struggle to sleep is different from each of those imbalances that I had mentioned before. If you really wanted to delve in it, you actually look at those 5 elements. But to simplify in Ayurveda, they have those 3 doshas, as we say, the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And if you remember, Vata was about movement, but when that gets excessive, you can have Vata type insomnia, which is your mind is always racing. You just can't slow it down. So for that type of person, what'll be really important is to find those kind of soothing music or soothing pre-sleep behaviors that can help your mind slow down. And perhaps you need to have a notepad and write things down so you have something else doing the thinking for you, so you don't have to worry that you're forgetting every single thing. If you have Pitta type insomnia, which is much more of that intensity and whatnot, people that have that type really can perseverate on maybe a negative experience that they had, to the point where, maybe they're angry about something, or maybe they got stressed about something, and that stress just is driven with anxiety. It's not this fleeting thoughts that are going, but this anxiety over this one thing. Or if you have a fight with your significant other, one thing I can tell you is, try to make it a point not to go to bed angry in that case, because your imbalance and your tendencies are going to be that you won't be able to sleep if you're not in the right frame of mind. So there, I think saying good night in a loving way, or just saying, okay, let's see if we're going to talk about things from an interrelationship perspective. Maybe we can move it to tomorrow and realize we'll come back to it. Or if it's one driving factor that's in there, is there a way that you can help to ease that intensity? And there are different kind of ways you can do that, but that's a pitta type insomnia. Or if you have a kapha type insomnia, which is just really, it's not an anxiety and it's not an intensity, but sometimes it just, there's a lot of inertia to get to bed. So you're just, these are the kind of people that aren't particularly bothered, but they might just watch TV the whole time and just sit there and let the TV keep running, and you keep watching show after show and you realize, oh, I haven't gone to bed yet, and then in the morning, and you have a tougher time getting up once you get to bed. And so for them, you kind of have to plan ahead a bit more and allow yourself that time that your body just naturally needs to get to sleep. And then if you try to rush it, then that becomes also a challenge, because then you start setting up a negative feedback loop that just doesn't, never fixes itself until you address it. So I think knowing where your imbalances are can really adjust some of your habits and how you approach sleep. Do you need to fly that airplane in on a long runway? Or do you just need to make that landing soft? Or do you need to just not have distractions so that you know where the runway is? You're not looking at all the scenery right when you're about to land. It's a kind of an analogy to just think of how our minds work.
That's so interesting. It's so helpful, mamas, if you want to think about that for your children too, because if they're having trouble during this pandemic time, sleeping or emotions, and they're different dosha type, which also I think of, my children go to the Waldorf school. And so my son is, they call phlegmatic, which I think is that kapha. It's like inertia type person. And so he has been having a hard time with the distance learning. He has been having a hard time getting up and moving because he's not in the routine. He doesn't have a routine. And everything's so different now. So when we're looking at the wellness of our families too, these special, attributes that we can look at are super helpful, because if we say, oh, my child's just not doing well, or they don't like distance learning, or they're having a hard time waking up because, that you think that they hate school now, well, there's a lot of underlying things here. And to look at the particular person with their certain dosha, with their certain attributes, I think that's like so much more helpful for the child, because there's usually a motivation underneath that, and then a constitution. And I think that's what we're talking about, is the constitution. And if we treat everyone, like, I know my other son is not that way. He's more vata. He's like, very moving, and and he's very task oriented. So he's like, da, da, da. And, so I think that, I can successfully get them to do the things they need to do by looking at their particular attributes and constitution of who they are. And then it's not a fight. I think that is something that moms don't realize, is like, there's not one set of rules for everybody, and it's not going to work for every child. And the same with our health and our well-being. I mean, health and well-being are we're talking about this whole well-being. And if we want our kids and ourselves to be well, this world is so crazy right now that it's like looking underneath those behaviors that are happening with your child, and looking underneath your sleeplessness, your coronasomnia. It's like, is it the anxiety? Is it that I'm upset about the one thing, or these different things? It's like, that is super helpful, because I really didn't go there with thinking about, why are we all having trouble sleeping? It's not, some people are scrolling, the minders, but other people are having, they're angry at politics, or, whatever it is. There's so much happening right now, so it's so helpful to think in these terms. And, I'm sure there's some more that you can tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think the key is just understanding that this is especially in this current environment, we're not going out, we're not cultivating those in-person contacts so much. And, Zoom is only going to be helpful to some extent, or, whatever kind of teleconferencing that you're doing. And I think for the kids, it does become a challenge, especially if they're used to that in-person energy. And now, like your son, for example, I mean, he has to go sit in front of a computer the whole day. I mean, I think that's really challenging. And then it becomes a cycle. You're at home and then you've never left the home and now you have to sleep, but the home is also the workplace. And, maybe as adults, we can balance this sort of a thing. And I'm a little lucky because I'm in the clinic. In a way, I actually come out of the house to be in the clinic to see patients. So I still get that, what we call circadian rhythm of work, but that's not always there if you're at home all the time. And now it just kind of blends. And you're also, if you have kids at home, you're also a teacher now partly, and you're trying to, organize that, and it just never turns off. So I really do feel like, more than anything else, if everybody in the house can commit to even doing something like meditating together, or whether it's getting one of these apps that you can just have people slow down and just kind of do it as a group, as a family, it'll really help set that tone that this is something that we do in the home rather than we're just all in the house together. And so you can set up family dynamics that can still allow for that to happen. I know we're all like talk about sitting around the dinner table, but I do think like sitting around and meditating for 5 minutes can be helpful. And even if your child is not willing to do it, just have them do it in their room, have them like listen to the app, even if it's going to be for a minute or 2 minutes. At least it'll introduce them early on, and they'll go back to it later on when it's time.
I'm seeing that, I'm imagining my 13-year-old and his little rebelliousness and how but I would say, come on, sit down and, and hum, or like or do something that feels different so that he can insert his individuality into what he's doing. And it can even be silly or whatever, but just to start that practice of, we're going to do this. This is going to be cool.
Maybe they need to have a meditation challenge on TikTok and then just make that
viral. For sure. It's on TikTok.
Yeah, and it can't come from, it's got to come from someone young. They've got to do something, just like a meditation prank or something like that.
It'll be a meme or a TikTok dance or something.
Something like that.
That's so true.
By the way, I'm totally a TikTok voyeur. I should probably start posting things here and there, but I love looking at all these videos. It's
that fun. Would be awesome. I would follow you for sure. There's something, I don't know if you want to get into this, but there's something you mentioned, the Angi. And I think that if that is not
Agni, right? Yeah, the
Agni. Yeah, if that's not too difficult to get into, that seems like one of the, we were talking to Karen Kirshner about microbiome a couple shows ago, and our gut health and how important that is for our well-being. And then from what I understand, that's the digestive fire. And so how can we improve our overall health by paying attention to that?
Yeah, and the digestive fire, as I mentioned before, isn't just about food. It's about all the inputs that you digest in the body. Normally people will talk about it as food that they eat in the digestive fire, but realize other things can, quote, kindle the fire or dampen the fire. So there are states of, we talk about states of Agni. So if your Agni is strong, but not overly strong, then you're matching what your input is. So as input comes in, you're digesting it and it's being digested in a healthy way. If you've lost, say, motivation, or you've lost like the sense of desire, or you have a low Agni, then if you eat too much food, what ends up happening is your caloric intake from a scientific perspective isn't matching your energy output. And even just from that level, if you just think of it from that standpoint, then what's going to happen? You're going to put on weight. You're going to have, there's also this whole notion of partially digested food. If your Agni isn't strong, then you're building up what are known as ama toxins, which isn't a concept in Western medicine really, but ama is this whole concept of, whether it's like what's responsible for putting on weight or causing you to become more fatigued or become lethargic. All of these factors are there. Or if your Agni is burning too strongly, in the sense that you're just always in this drive mode, and no matter what you're putting in, then you can burn out more easily. And so you always have to look at where is the Agni, how do you dampen, how do you get it to be kindled? And that's where the Ayurvedic evaluation is so important. And that's going to be hard for me to just mention in a podcast, but realize, go and see an Ayurvedic practitioner, or go see someone that has Ayurvedic knowledge to help think through those things, because that's where, and it's not just about herbs. I mean, there are practices, Like if you're going to do yoga and you have an issue with a lot of heavy Agni as it is, you don't want to be doing hot yoga because that's just going to add more fuel to the fire, so to speak. And we see this even if you have facial rosacea, which is an inflammatory condition. If you go and do hot yoga, your rosacea will get worse. And so you have to do other kind of vinyasa or slow flow yogas, or maybe a power yoga that isn't going to be in high heat, as one small example. So yeah, Agni is all about the digestion. So it's not just food, but say spicy food. That's going to, as we know, if you already have a tendency towards heartburn, eating spicy food is basically adding pitta to someone that already has a pitta imbalance or tendency, then of course they're going to get even worse in indigestion and heartburn. Or on the other side, if you have a lot more gas and you're eating things that, that you think are healthy, a lot of broccoli, a lot of raw foods like raw cauliflowers or, whatever it is, that might actually end up doing, harm in the end. You might end up actually flaring the vata imbalance. And then now you're having a very, very gassy day for the rest of the day. And so thinking about these sorts of balances and microbalances is about creating the right connections and that right relationship to yourself. So I guess it all circles back to knowing yourself is the first step to then having a good cultivated relationship.
That's a great, whole circle back is like really paying attention to who we are, the balance of us as individuals. And, there's so much to know. And it sounds like in order to really know the details, we need to go to somebody knowledgeable, because we can listen to ourselves to a certain extent. And then if we have issues, I guess, if we're not finding our way, then having someone really look at the details of where we need to improve, or where we made different choices that maybe aren't the best choice for us, would be really great. So exactly. If you're open to doing a lightning round of fun questions, are you open to that? We could do that.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, I just think it's really fun to see what people who are really good at their health are doing in their own personal day to day. So okay, so this is just a set of questions. So what is your favorite healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well, I will tell you, I don't always eat breakfast, because sometimes I will, and it was probably unintentional in the beginning, but I'll do intermittent fasting every once in a while. So, but my favorite, I would say, so it depends. I will intermittent fast on certain days. So I just have a nice dinner and I skip breakfast and I'll eat lunch. But if you wanted to ask me what is my favorite lunch or dinner, I love rice and I love eating it more if I have to have it earlier in the day. I love vegetables. I just love vegetables that have been marinated with stuff that you put it in your mouth and you can just squish them against the top of your mouth and then drain all that really flavorful juice out of them. So I've grown to really like the just natural flavors of vegetables, but I love it when they get marinated in Asian spices and whatnot. So that's, I think, my soft spot.
That gives me ideas for dinner tonight. So what's your favorite place to buy groceries and why?
Farmer's market, because I feel like I'm supporting the community and I feel like you're getting it fresh. Sacramento, we're lucky. We have a lot of local growers. And so I feel more connected. So that ether element grows as I also grow the other elements as possible. So yeah, farmers markets where I love to shop if possible.
Cool. When is your favorite exercise and why?
Well, I play tennis quite a bit. I hope to be playing a bit more. I haven't been playing as much lately, but I like I like exercises where I can do something with another person. So tennis, I guess I could play tennis against a wall, but usually I have to do something that's with another person. So I like social exercises, so to speak. And I'm also a musician. I don't know if that's an exercise, but I like music. But again, it's social because you have to get together with other people to do things. So I guess anything social.
That really fulfills a different part of your well-being, it sounds like.
Yeah, it does.
Cool. Okay. And how many hours of sleep do you need and what do you actually get?
Yes. So the Ayurvedic perspective is that not everybody needs 8 hours of sleep. So 8 hours of sleep is something that the average person needs across the board. And the reason I say this is if I get 8 hours of sleep, I'm extremely groggy and it's too much for me. And I usually am good to go on 5 to 6. And I've been doing that for a long time. And my mom usually gets 4 to 5 hours. And she's been doing it for a long time. And she's very, very healthy, very well rested. I don't see her having any issues with insomnia or anything like that. Same thing for me. I need about 4 to 5, but if I can get 5 to 6, then I'm really good. If I go above that, even my wife will say, she asked me, why are you like moping around or what's the deal? And so I
Interesting.
just get, I do get a bit groggy. Now there are some days where I only get 2 hours or maybe 3 hours. And then of course you have to catch up. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. That being said, I think in general for people, it's important to get about 7 to 8 hours, but realize there is a bell-shaped curve and there are people on different ends of that curve. And just because someone else is getting 4 hours doesn't mean that you need to try to compete with them to get 4 hours. Just realize maybe their body's built a little differently. But by and large, I think most people will probably need around 7 to 8.
I learned so much from these questionings because, it's like 5 hours, that's so amazing that you can just, I mean, that is like the best nugget for you of sleep. And then you're good. And then you're energized,
For me personally, but I definitely don't recommend that to the
I mean,
general
for
person.
you.
Yeah,
And then
for
you
me,
probably
though,
have
yeah.
like hours to do like other fun things that you can fill that other time with, which is awesome. I wish
Although
that were.
sleep is pretty fun, I will say, it depends. My tendencies are pitta vata. And so for that, I think tendency, and I have to be careful because I can also get eczema on my skin, and I have eczema and I can flare pretty badly. But one of the benefits is that you usually don't need as much sleep. That actually kind of goes along with it. But if you have more kapha, which a lot of people do, they have more kapha or they have more of the pitta without that vata component, then you sometimes need a lot more sleep. Sometimes you need 9 hours, sometimes you need 10 hours. So take it easy with your child too. If your child is sleeping a lot, sometimes they need that sleep. So you don't want to push your own tendencies on other people. Try to understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always a thing with me and my husband. He's like late night person, like, oh, come on, let's watch this show on Netflix. And I'm like, oh, my eyes are like so heavy. I can't even keep them open. And I just sit with him, even though my eyes are closed sometimes, just to be together.
Oh, that's very sweet of you.
But we're all different. Okay. So do you have, oh, I'm sure you do you have a meditative or a calming practice? And what
I
is
do.
it?
It's music for me. I
Mhm.
play the veena, which is a South Indian instrument. It's classical music, but when we play ragas, which are different sorts of scales, but the scales have a lot of emotion embedded into them, you forget where you are. And I think all of us have meditative practices. We have things that help us forget where we are. I tried to tell my mom I had a meditative practice when I used to play a lot of video games, and she didn't really buy it. But I guess that was a meditative practice because I didn't hear a word she said. But currently I focus on music, not so much video games.
Oh, that's cool. Well, yeah, every phase has its own, like, I guess zone out kind of phase. Like, I'm sure for children, some children, it's like they feel happier watching TikTok or video games than, you know. So, all right. Let's see. If you have a guilty pleasure when it comes to food, what is it? And then how much do you allow yourself to indulge?
Well, there are a couple guilty pleasures. I have a big sweet tooth. Everybody thinks I do not, but I actively avoid it because I know that I just embed into it, and I can be a little bit addictive. That's probably the pitta in me that can get a bit addictive. So for example, if I find, like, I've now stopped eating dairy as much just because I find myself not needing it as often. And I also sometimes get a little bit of an indigestion when I do. But if I have like a really great non-dairy ice cream, if I don't watch it, I'll go through the whole tub. And so I have to be careful because I'm just like, wow, this tastes so good. And I love the taste, and I just get enwrapped into that. And then you look down and you're like, well, that probably wasn't the best for me. But every once in a while, you know what? Maybe it is,
Mhm,
maybe it's
mhm.
like surfing outdoors. You just need to protect yourself as much as possible. But sometimes we just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right. Yeah, I think it's that overall experience, the texture, the melting in your mouth,
yes.
I can tell like the mouth feel for you, the melting, the liquidy, like having that experience is probably soothing in some sense. So all of that is like really important, actually, I think, when we think about just overall joy of life.
Well, you're already gotten me thinking about it now. So
Okay, well, there's those vegetables too. So remember that.
which I also like too. That's the other problem. If I find food that tastes really good, I'll get that second serving or third serving that I didn't need, even if it's healthy food. And then I'm like, I ate too much, but there's a bliss in that, every day's Thanksgiving when that happens, I suppose.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Okay. And so speaking about joy, what are the three things that you love or you do to cause joy on purpose for yourself?
Well, first of all, love itself, relationships. I think, whether it's my wife or family, I think that's the first source of joy. Um, I don't know if that's something that I cause, but I think I try to really focus in on that. Second one is just feeling real emotions. So, in a funny way, if I can connect with my patient and really understand why they're sad or why they're happy. I mean, we get, as physicians, we get to really delve into the personal aspects of someone's life, and it's a privilege, but it also gives me a window into humanity. And I think that's what makes me feel vital and alive. And at the end of the day, that's what I think is joy. And so that's really important for me. And then music is just it, no matter what kind of music it is, I think it engages this whole other side of your brain where you can be as technical as you want, but some things just sound good. And you can't always describe it with like a biochemical reaction, or you can't describe it with theory. There's a theory after the fact, but it just sounds good. And you're like, that just sounded good. So I think those kind of aesthetics also bring me joy.
Mm. In just your answers, I just can see how you've carved out this life for yourself of such joy. I mean, you have chosen every single part of your life and it's fulfilling so much for you. What a model for us. I mean, I'm not saying like perfection, but it's like a model to walk in that path of finding, maybe it's the bioengineering mind of like, it's not a set thing that you have, that somebody else has carved out for you, but taking all those pieces of things that make sense to you and then carving out that individually. It may not look like everybody else's life, taking Ayurveda, dermatology, integrative medicine, all these different pieces by engineering. But what a beautiful life. How wonderful.
Oh, you're so sweet. Yeah, I do have to say, there's that part of me that loves the engineering because you can describe things and figure stuff out. But there's also that art and the music where some things you just know they feel right, or they sound good, or taste good, or they hear well, or the touch just feels right, and you can't. There's no explanation. It's the mysticism. So I think I'm trying. I think that balance is yeah, really important. And you're right, I do find joy in almost everything that I do. I don't Maybe that's why I feel alive. I'm ready after 5 hours to go back to it because I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything.
Mm.
I don't feel like I need more sleep. So
Maybe the formula for vitality, like you were talking about.
yeah, I think being vital is really important. On that note, I will say that we are developing a website with a free tool to help people figure out, where they are on their personalization. It's called Jivome.
Awesome.
Jiva means vitality, and your biome is what makes you up. So, this Jivome is just what is your ecosystem that makes you vital and makes you well. And so we've put that together. We have a tiny little quiz on there. It's all free, and we have content that we put up there. And, we do have things like we will have products and stuff that we'll match people to, but all that stuff is just extra. If people just want to come on there and just learn something about themselves, that's what I hope they do. And,
Wow.
check it out.
What a great offering. Thank you for doing that. That's so helpful. That's so awesome. I just have one more question. if you've learned a golden nugget for success or happiness that most people don't know, what would that be?
Is that you can be happy today. You don't have to wait till tomorrow to be happy, because you have to find all of those things that you can have gratitude for in the now. Because it's hard to always say, I'm going to get there tomorrow if you're not already feeling it. So, and we all have things that we can be grateful for today. And I think practicing gratitude helps you understand gratitude, and it makes you more grateful. And I think it feeds itself. So just start by thinking of all the things that you are grateful for, truly grateful for, and consciously and honestly grateful for. And I think that's the first step to being joyful for the rest of your life.
Mm. Yes, I love that. Wow. I just love everything that we learned from this quiz, and the entire talk has been so amazing. Is there anything else that you would want us to know as far as how we can find you, and if we're interested in any other parts of what you do?
Oh, if you ever want to check out our practice, I have a private practice that's looking at medical, but I talked about the integrative practice. We now have it open for wellness consultations if anyone is interested, or to come check it out. We're in Sacramento, but we also have an online presence. It's called Zen Dermatology. And so you can just go to zendermatology.com. And then our wellness platform, Jivome, Jivome. Just come check that out. We really, really, truly believe that holistic health is way, way, way better health. And if you're a professional, you can find me on LearnSkin.com, where we do a lot of educational services for professionals around integrative medicine and integrative dermatology. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be had online, and we're embracing it as well. It's the next generation of holistic living.
That's so awesome. Did you have a podcast also?
I do. Yes, we have the Holistic Health podcast. We put it on through Jivome. And we talk to different sorts of experts from around the world, and different perspectives, whether it be an integrative psychiatrist or a chef that'll walk you through how to shop well at a grocery store, an integrative chef. So we try to take all kinds of approaches to help different aspects of your life. So yes, the Holistic Health podcast is another one that I do.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for being such a generous teacher to everyone. I mean, I see in all the things you're doing that it really matters to you, that you help to inform us about our well-being in so many different ways, whether it's other colleagues at that level or just the average person. So I so appreciate you being here and helping us in the Maui community to understand these things during this pandemic time, which is so odd, but all the things that you've taught me just from this, I feel like I could take beyond the pandemic. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Angelina. And I love your podcast, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks. So, excuse me. So where are you zooming off to now?
Well, actually, I have to put together a couple lectures because we have our symposium coming up. So that's what I'm going to be working on right now.
See, more teaching.
More teaching. That's right.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Angelina. Yeah.
Okay, mamas, wasn't that really fun, informative? I just feel like download of such great information. And, if you've been following along with our proactive pandemic wellness shows that we've aired, you'll see how we're just adding more and more to our wellness toolbox. It's going to be really helpful, because if we look at all those and put those into practice, then we might be able to be even asymptomatic when this virus comes through and infects us. Wouldn't that be awesome? You might want to look back at the microbiome show, which is really cool. I met Dr. Raja through Kiran Kirshnan, and he's got a lot of really great stuff to talk about that really connects with what we learned from Dr. Raja today. Okay, now Halloween is coming up, and did you see this? Seabury Hall is hosting a drive-through Halloween. We'll be talking about more Halloween options in the upcoming shows, since the usual Front Street and neighborhood trick-or-treating will not be happening. And here's something you'll want to know about. Since we're at home more, the Hui No'eau Visual Arts Center is offering a virtual look at their Malama Wa'o Akua art exhibition. You can view it online, and you can also take your family to see it in person, starting November 6th, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the gallery. And Hui is also offering a kids' winter wonderland camp, ages 6 through 10. Camp Kalua Nui offers hands-on projects that exercise kids' imaginations, keep their bodies active, and develop individual expression. Register by calling 808-572-6560. And remember, if you want to keep the show going, you can text to donate to the CoronaMama Show. That number is 808-215-4858, or click on the donation link below in the Maui Mama Facebook page. Okay. And now stay tuned for some of the incredible, beautiful artwork from these local artists as part of the Malama Wa'o Akua art exhibition from the Hui. For now, take care, stay safe, and be well. Aloha.
This is a good day as any to start the rebuilding of life. The roads that lay open are many when the old one's gone under the knife. And I can feel the sun on my skin, beginning to thaw from within. Today and not tomorrow, there's no time to borrow. Today is a good day to live. This morning has a clear light as any to see the horizon in the far. Excuses were 2 for a penny, but they've all gone out the window of this car. And when I feel the wind on my face, all that ever was is a wreck. Today and not tomorrow, there's no time to borrow. Today, well, something's gotta give. Today is a good day. Today and not tomorrow, there's no time to borrow. Something's gotta give. Today is a good day to live. Tomorrow, there's no time to borrow. Today, well, something's gotta give. Today is a good day. Today and not tomorrow, there's no time to borrow. Something's gotta give. Today is a good day. Today is a good day. Today is a good day to live. Something's gotta give. today is a good day today and not tomorrow. There's no time to borrow today. Well, something's gotta give today. It's a good day today. It's a good day today. It's a good day to live.